Zoe Watts was once a police officer, someone trusted to protect the public. But somewhere along the line, things turned dark. She ran a small YouTube channel about survivalism, building shelters, lighting fires, and turning everyday items into tools. One video showed how to modify a baseball bat with nails. Another demonstrated how to make tampon fire rockets using wax and paraffin. To her viewers, it looked like creativity, maybe even harmless fun. But police would later discover that the weapons in those videos weren't props. They were real. When officers raided her home in Lincoln, they found bomb-making materials and 3D-printed gun parts designed to bypass the very laws she once enforced. It became one of the strangest cases in modern British policing. A survivalist YouTuber, once a PCSO, now at the centre of a national security scare. It began on a cold December morning. Armed officers pulled over a small hatchback on a quiet Lincoln street. The driver wasn't a known gangster, it was Zoe Watts, a woman who had spent nearly a decade working for the police. Intelligence from the National Crime Agency and Border Force had shown parcels addressed to her containing banned items. 2 butterfly knives from the Netherlands, chemical compounds, and suspicious payments linked to 3D printing forums. While she was being arrested, other officers entered her home on St. Helens Avenue. What they found looked more like a film set than a family house. Boxes stacked to the ceiling, wires, and improvised devices everywhere. Among the chaos were knives, a crossbow, a modified fly swatter capable of delivering an electric shock, and a 3D printer quietly humming in the corner. That printer had produced parts of a weapon called the FGC-9, a design whose initials stand for F gun control. It's a blueprint that had been spreading across dark corners of the internet, a firearm purposely engineered to dodge licensing laws. Officers realized they hadn't just caught a hoarder, they had uncovered one of the first known attempts in Britain to build a working semi-automatic firearm using a desktop printer. This wasn't the first time Zoe Watts had crossed the line. Back in 2020, she was arrested for making an improvised explosive device and hoarding illegal weapons,
So I got my
including
crossbow
stun
with a
guns
scope,
and knives.
and me.
At the time, she told investigators it was all for her YouTube channel, a place she called Survival Mistakes. She claimed her experiments were about education and self-reliance, not violence. But bomb disposal officers had to evacuate nearby homes after discovering volatile chemicals: nitroglycerin, potassium nitrate, and nitrocellulose. Even though she insisted she was just curious, the materials were capable of causing serious injury. In 2021, she was sentenced to 27 months for weapons offences. She served her time, vanished from the internet, and for a while it seemed like that chapter was closed. But old habits die hard. Late in 2024, customs officers intercepted more suspicious parcels. Inside were small metal parts and filament reels flagged for possible weapon manufacture. Lincolnshire police began monitoring her online activity and soon noticed forum posts about 3D printed firearms using her handle. When investigators returned to her property, they found what one detective called an Aladdin's cave of weapons. Dozens of blades, a crossbow, stun devices, and boxes of labelled chemical powders filled the house. The focus quickly turned to the 3D printer hidden in a cupboard. Next to it were half-finished gun frames, bolts, and a short steel barrel, the missing piece of a live firearm. Firearms experts later assembled the parts. The weapon didn't fire, but with minor modifications it could have. Tests suggested it would be capable of discharging 33 rounds in under 15 seconds, effectively a semi-automatic carbine. When they searched her computer, investigators found design files for the FGCMK2 Nutty variant, a version never before seen in the UK. There were also Google queries like, "Has anybody been killed by a 3D printed gun?" and research on where to buy more components anonymously. To police, that search history was intent. To Zoe, it was curiosity. She told them she was simply making a toy fidget gun. For Christmas, a novelty for friends. But the timeline, and her past, told a different story. At Lincoln Crown Court, prosecutors described the firearm as a lethal weapon deliberately designed to evade control. They pointed to her previous conviction for explosives and to the planning required to gather all the parts. Her defense said she was neurodivergent, fascinated by mechanics, and socially isolated. They argued that no bullets, ammunition, or completed guns were found. She had served honorably as a PCSO for 8 years and had never threatened or harmed anyone. But the judge saw a repeating pattern. A former officer who once made bombs, now printing guns. He called it a deep-seated obsession with weapons. He acknowledged that custody would be difficult because of her previous police career and transgender identity, yet said public safety had to come first. In August 2024, the verdict was delivered. Guilty. 8 years and 6 months in prison, the first UK conviction for attempting to manufacture a firearm with a 3D printer. She was also banned from owning printers, weapon parts, or any controlled materials for 5 years after release. The case sent shockwaves through Lincolnshire Police. Assistant Chief Constable Kerrin Wilson called it a difficult and unsettling moment. She said, "We expect our officers and staff to uphold the law. When that trust is broken, we have to act decisively." Detective Inspector Gemma Skipworth, who led the operation, used the conviction as a public warning. Doing something behind closed doors doesn't mean you're safe. If you're printing or experimenting with firearms, you will face a lengthy jail sentence. The National Crime Agency has since highlighted the case as a benchmark for how 3D-printed weapons are treated under the Firearms Act 1968. They warned that downloading or producing even a single component counts as manufacturing a prohibited weapon. Experts also said the technology is advancing faster than the law. A printer that once took days to produce a fragile prototype can now make a reinforced frame in hours, and designs like the FGC9 circulate freely online, turning a cheap hobby printer into a potential armory. Zoe Watts' story became a turning point in the UK conversation about DIY weapons. It showed how quickly curiosity can slide into criminality, and how someone trained to enforce the law can end up breaking it. She claimed it was all for creativity, for YouTube, for self-expression, but the evidence painted a different picture. One of fascination turning into fixation, and fixation into danger. For investigators, the lesson was clear. Technology may change, but intent still matters. A downloaded file can be as dangerous as a stolen gun when placed in the wrong hands. Watts lost her career, her freedom, and her reputation. Her videos, once quirky survival guides, are now exhibits in a courtroom archive. In an age where anyone can press print and create almost anything, the line between invention and illegality grows thinner every day. Curiosity built Zoe Watts' channel, but it also built the weapon that ended her freedom. And for the former officer turned survivalist, that realization came far too late.